Hello, welcome to the XO Conversations podcast. I'm your host, Rishma Walji. I spent over 20 years in clinical practice as a naturopathic doctor, and I also have experience in academia through teaching and research after I completed my PhD. The common theme of episodes on this podcast is using the science of personal growth to help us lead more extraordinary lives, whatever that might look like in this moment for you. For resources such as my free workshop on emotional regulation or my free assessment looking at how intentional you are in your life, head over to my website, livingxo.com. Having had exposure to different forms of medicine, both natural and pharmaceutical, I think today's conversation is a really important one. Not only to talk about mental health and how it impacts people, but also to dive into different healing approaches that can be extremely beneficial. My guest today is Dr. Christina Bjorndal. She's a naturopathic doctor and an authority in the treatment of mental illnesses such as depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, and eating disorders. She is the author of several books, including one titled Beyond the Label, 10 Steps to Improve Your Mental Health with Naturopathic Medicine. I hope you enjoy this episode. So, hello. Thank you so much for joining me, Dr. Chris. Do people call you Dr. Chris? Yeah. I know people in practice used to call me Dr. Rishma too, but I think for me, people don't know which one's my first name and which one's my last name. So maybe you can just give a quick background about yourself and, what you do, and then we can jump right into it. I'm excited to get into the topic today.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm a naturopathic doctor practicing in Edmonton, and I specialize primarily in helping people regain their mental health. And I haven't always been a naturopathic doctor, and it's through my own journey with my mental health. So I have had several labels beyond. So my book is called Beyond the Label because I really felt like the labels for me were stigmatizing, and I think contributed to my suffering and my inability to reach out for help because I felt ashamed by them. So those included anxiety, depression, bipolar disorder, type 1. I'm a suicide survivor, and also bulimia. And I got to throw a little bit of ADD probably in there as well, and OCD probably. So anyway, it was just through my own struggles. Like I said, I was really sick and tired of being tired and sick that I ended up seeking help eventually after a suicide attempt that left me in pretty rough shape. So I ended up making this career change back in 1999, 2000, and had to go back to high school because I didn't do the science route the first time. And so then on to naturopathic school, and here I am.
I think it's wonderful that you're helping so many people. And also, I think it's so brave that you were sharing your journey. And I know you've been open about your past diagnoses and things that you've gone through. And you've come through the other end, and you know so much that has helped you. And now you're passionate about helping other people. And I'm sure it's an ongoing journey, but I think it's brave that you've been sharing it. And I think it's easier for people to relate to. And I know even just having a diagnosis is so scary, or thinking about it. We have a lot of mental health stuff in our family too. And even just, thinking about it is scary. Sometimes forget about actually talking about it and trying to do something about it. So I think it's wonderful that you're doing it. And I want to get into it because I do feel like this is a topic that people need to talk about more so that they really understand not only what is going on in their own bodies and minds, but also what they can do about it. So I guess the first question is, where do you think people should start if they feel like something might be off, or if a family member might be off?
Mm-hmm. Well, if it's yourself, and sometimes the problem is for the individual who's going through whatever it is that they're going through, you're not objective about your subjective reality. So, and again, these masks that we wear and the shame that we carry sometimes stops us from reaching out for help. So often with mental health, this caregiver piece or community piece or social piece is really important, because I know for me, I wouldn't I'm not here because of my efforts. I'm here because of everybody in my life that loved and cared about me, who made the recommendations, made the appointments, drove me to these appointments. I had an indifferent willingness to go, but I didn't seek out the care, right? The care was sought out for me by somebody who loved me. And I think we have to really understand and emphasize this, that this is a social condition, if you will. And mental health problems are, they're born by society. We're all responsible for each other. And we are all in this being, this human experience together. I mean, you look at babies, if they're not held and cared for from birth, they die, right? We need this human interaction. So if you're somebody who knows that you're not quite right? You knows that you're wanting to stay under the covers and you don't want to get out of bed to face the day, or you're really paralyzed with anxiety, but don't know how to communicate, or you're secretly binging and purging, you've got some awareness. Now I'm giving you permission to lean into your vulnerability and your authenticity and just say, hey, put your hand up. I need help. Mm-hmm. And if you're a caregiver and you know that someone is struggling, then just continuing to show up with love and compassion. Recognize that they may not be ready to take the steps. They might not be ready to go to that appointment. Don't take it personally, but keep showing up, keep calling, keep showing up. And honestly, I wouldn't be here if people didn't do that for me.
Yeah. And doing it with compassion, I find that sometimes we get frustrated with people, or I've seen, someone says something that you don't agree with, or someone reacts in a way that you feel like they shouldn't have reacted that way, but recognizing that they have a different reality in their mind. There's a different, train of thought. There's something different happening. And so if you know that person is struggling with something, then just approaching it with compassion and maybe trying to communicate in that way, I find at least has been really important for me in my own personal situations, and also with patients I've seen, just because they're thinking a different way and they're maybe looking at things, and we all have our own perspective, of course, based on our experience.
Exactly. Yeah. And it really is important to not take it personally, right? And to understand that people have bad days. Sometimes people are in pain. They're going to be might be a bit snippy or snappy, or but you don't just stop because you have one little bump with somebody. It's a bump, and you always want to look at, well, what's behind that behavior? And if you can understand that often it has nothing to do with you, then it's easier to continue to show up in love and grace and compassion, and ask yourself, gosh, how would I want to be treated if I had a bad day? Would I want somebody to write me off just because I had one bad day? Mm-hmm.
I want to get into, you have some really good approaches for mental health. I mean, because I think the conventional side is very straightforward. People know, like, I go to therapy and then I get my meds. And so, although obviously it's a complex process of doing it, but it seems to be more straightforward in terms of, like, this is what you do. And I, of course, also in the naturopathic world, we have other perspectives. And so I really want to get into your treatment options and things that you suggest for people to look into, depending on where their needs are. But before we get there, I was wondering if maybe you can spend a minute. I think we define mental health in such a clinical way. And I'm wondering if maybe we can put a human aspect on it, because, we talk about depression or anxiety in a clinical way. And I think it would be useful for people to know, like, what does it really mean when someone has, let's say, depression or anxiety?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've often said that it would be so lovely if we could have the ability to slip into somebody's experience and really feel what it's like to be in their body, right? So these terms are used quite broadly and loosely, and they can have different meanings. And with depression, I really liked how my psychiatrist used to define it for me. He would say, there's a difference between the inside affecting the outside and the outside affecting the inside. They both can show up as depression. So examples of that would be, so in my life, the outside looked like there was nothing to complain about. There was seemingly no problems in the outside world, outside of myself. But yet I was depressed. So that's often, what people often use is that you've got a chemical imbalance in your brain. Now, I don't completely subscribe to that theory, but it's just that the inside is more the problem, if you will. And then the constellation of symptoms that can correlate with that can include this not wanting to face the day, not wanting to get out of bed, not having any energy, not having any appetite or will to nurture or care for yourself, not motivated, inability to concentrate, think you can't do anything right. I mean, it just goes on, right? And then, the outside affecting the inside is more circumstantial in the sense that it could be going through a divorce. It could be you get fired from your job, you loss of a loved one, a physical injury can lead into the mental health component. So they're both on both categories, depression, but the root cause is different. And I think we want to understand this word that's used a lot as well, which is stress, right? Is what's the weight of the stresses in your life can leave you feeling similar to depression. But again, what's the root of the problem? And as naturopathic doctors, that's what we're always investigating. And one of my teachers, Gabor Mate, he says, what emotion have you depressed? What emotion have you pushed down within you that you're not willing to, or not that you're not willing, but that you haven't expressed? And when we suppress things, they still affect us in a certain way. And depression is one representation of suppressed emotions. And with respect to anxiety, that can be, again, there's lots of symptoms, but it's for me, it's this tightness in the chest, difficulty breathing. I can get sweaty palms, feel paralyzed in my tracks. I don't want to be around anybody. I don't think I have anything to say. I can't form a sentence. It gets, those are the main symptoms that I've experienced and that I hear people talk about as well.
Yeah, thank you. Because I feel like this is really important. I used to see in practice a lot of people who would go through external factors, like you mentioned, loss of a loved one, or maybe some kind of trauma or something like that. I was in hormones and fertility, so a lot of fertility struggles. And, you get into this place of course, there's situational, but I think if there is that emotion that hasn't never been expressed or wasn't given the opportunity to be expressed or for whatever reason, then we start creating other narratives in our minds. And I think that can be mistaken for stress, and that can be mistaken for other things when really there is this, I guess, disconnect between the emotion and the expression. And then, of course, layered on top of that, any other chemicals in the brain or situational, or whether it's, so I think mental health has this sort of conception where people think, oh, something is wrong with me, but that's not necessarily actually what's happening. Sometimes there is an imbalance, but then sometimes there's a bunch of things piled on to other things and then more things. And we don't really have the tools to deal with it. At least that's the way I think of mental health. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but that's where I see that there's so many things that can contribute to mental health, being whatever the diagnosis, whatever the label is. And so I feel like there is a time and place for medication. There is a time and place for counseling, but there's so many other avenues because there's so many other causes too.
Mm-hmm. It's super complicated. And the other important thing is that you may not even know, right? The person next to you, like I'm very good at wearing a mask, or I was very good at wearing a mask. And so people might seemingly look, quote unquote, fine on the outside, but they're actually just not. And it's because we don't have a safe container or a safe environment to truly express, oh my gosh, right now I'm feeling like I'm going to have a panic attack, or I am having a panic attack. That I think we perpetuate the problem by not being authentic, right? And the other thing too is that you mentioned, this narrative, these thoughts that are in the head, and 95% of your mind is the subconscious mind, right? Which means that it's not at the forefront. It's lurking behind here. And 95% of, or a huge percentage of that is formed in childhood in response to situations and circumstances. So the reality is we are, this is essentially a computer right here, and it's programmed, and it's being programmed by the people in your life. So, and I don't mean that in a negative way. I just want you to understand that everybody's taken residence up in here. Your parents, your grandparents, your siblings, your cousins, your friends, your teachers, your coaches, partners, the bus driver. People make comments and they go in here, and you start to think about them, and then you form a belief around that, which could be completely not even what it remotely close to what was intended. But we don't check in with people.
Oh my gosh, this is a big stressor of mine, knowing, like, being in healthcare and then raising my kids. I'm like, what are they internalizing about? Sometimes it's my own emotion coming out on them. It has nothing to do with them. What are they internalizing? So yeah, I totally agree with it. It feels stressful. I'm trying not to take it on as my responsibility. I'm trying to teach them how to manage their own emotions and how to understand themselves the way that I'm trying to understand myself. And I think we all could learn to how to understand ourselves better. So getting into that, what are some things that you suggest for people? What kinds of strategies or what are some things that you would like to share?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll share a little bit of a story so that it helps to put it into context. And so trauma is a big piece of, and I'm not talking always, so both kinds of trauma, it's still relevant if you have had a small little trauma. It's not always the big T things that we think about, but those big T things obviously are super important. But small little traumas like being bullied, bullying is a big trauma, but sometimes when it happened to me, it just was kind of just dismissed, right? So the trauma in my life, the big one is being adopted. And the thing with adoption is, there's a great quote that goes like this: adoption is the only trauma where the adoptee is expected to be grateful. Mm. So we don't even get to honor the sense that it was a kind of not perhaps a great thing that happened to us. And when I learned I was adopted, I formed some beliefs about that. When I was little, I was 5. So I didn't understand what the word meant completely. So the belief I formed was, I'm not wanted. I'm here temporarily. And basically I'm not worthy. And so what I did to kind of keep my place in the world, if you will, is I did the opposite of how whatever that type of person would feel. I became an overachiever and a perfectionist type of person. But what was driving that behavior was this sense of lack, this sense of not being lovable, if you will. And so this is a really good example of this inner critic, this voice. And everybody has a voice in their heads that's usually talking to them. And my voice was very, I'm going to use a strong word. I'm going to use the word abusive. My voice was very critical, right? You're not doing good enough. You've got to do it better, faster, high, jump higher, run. Just nothing was ever good enough. It was exhausting. No wonder I hit depression in university, striving to be the best in university, right? Like it was exhausting. And when I worked with Dr. Mate, he asked me, well, again, what emotion have you suppressed? And I said, well, I didn't really know, because I didn't really feel like I had. And he asked me about anger. And I said, I'm not very comfortable with anger. Well, why? And anyways, he brought up about me being adopted and asked me, well, how do you think you felt coming out of the womb? And you're a mother, and anyone who's a mother listening, think about, we all came out of a womb. All of us, we all have that in common, right? So how do you think you would feel? We might be a little bit angry about that, right? And what could you do with those emotions when you're a newborn baby? Right? You're not wired yet. You're still developing. So it was something that I really did, I think, suppress because it wasn't safe for me to be angry, because look what happened when I got angry right out of the gate. I lost, you lost your mother, so to speak. But again, it's not rational, and it's just a situation. It's a circumstance. So it's important so I've sort of got off on a tangent. I apologize. But the point is, you want to look at what are the beliefs that are driving you, because you have your core beliefs, which are in the front of in your conscious mind, but then we have all this subconscious stuff. So another example about this would be, you have a subconscious belief, or we can call it a shadow belief or an unconscious commitment at play whenever you say you want something, but you never do it.
Mm.
So an example, I wanted to leave my corporate job, was about 2 years into it. But I never would. And everybody would be sick and tired of hearing me say about, how I wanted to leave my job and blah, blah, you sound like a broken record after a while. And it took me a decade to leave that. But one of the reasons I didn't know this until I did this work on this subconscious piece. One of the reasons is it felt safer to me to stay in the current circumstances of that job that was sucking the life out of me than risk rejection looking for another job, because that's my core wound, right? So you're always going to do what you think is safer and is going to protect you based on the beliefs that you formed and what you think you need to do to keep yourself safe in the world.
Yeah, I totally believe in these subconscious beliefs, and I talk about them at a lot of my workshops too. And thank you for sharing the example that you had. I share some of these very personal examples too, because I think it helps really to understand what it means. Otherwise, it's so abstract. I guess one of my questions is, how do people understand what their subconscious, if it's subconscious after all, right? Like, how do we uncover? I mean, I know for myself, I just think about these things and work on them and talk them through. And you almost have to talk to somebody about it, because otherwise, like, it's your own belief, right? So you're just reinforcing that belief in your own mind until you talk to someone else who might challenge you a little bit. So that's, for me, helpful. But, what are some other ways, or is there another way that people can really be aware of their self-conscious beliefs?
Well, I think it starts with, that piece of what are you saying that you want in your life, but you're not actually doing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where it's a very simple place to start, just looking at that, and then start asking yourself the question, well, why? Why are you making that choice? So, you say you want to pursue a different career, or you say you want to lose weight, or you say you want to run a marathon, or you say you want to, whatever it could be goal oriented, could be leave your marriage. It could be big things like that. But whatever the fear is, we want to understand that that's a protective mechanism that you've put in place to protect you from some sort of pain that occurred in your past.
Yeah, for sure. Avoidance is like that too. Oh, I don't want to talk about this. Yes. Because that's like, I don't want to go there,
Yeah, that's right. So just start with that for now. Mm-hmm. And then I might, if you want to take it further, I would encourage people to look into the compassionate inquiry process. There's lots of skilled practitioners out there. If you just go to compassionateinquiry.com, because here's the thing, you have three main needs as when you're growing up: attachment, attunement, and authenticity. And the priority is attachment, right? If we don't attach to our caregivers, we're not surviving, right? And so as a result, if you've grown up in an alcoholic home, or a home where there was a lot of rage, you learn to be quiet. You learn to keep the peace, and you end up suppressing yourself. You cannot be authentic in that environment because it's not safe, because it threatens your attachment. But the problem is that is a wonderful strategy when you're 5, 10, 12, 15 years old. But that strategy doesn't work when you're 35 years old.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so we have to learn to switch the strategy and understand the mechanism and the reasons why you formed that strategy, the beliefs behind that strategy, and then bring that to your conscious awareness, and then create a new empowering belief going forward.
Interesting. So
Sounds
attachment,
simple when I
attunement
say it. I'm like, well, that just sounds super easy. Why?
It's a lifetime. It's a lifetime of work. Attachment, attunement, and authenticity. What does attunement mean?
Attunement is you need an adult and an emotionally regulated adult to attune to you as a developing child emotionally. So what this means is when your child is having a temper tantrum, you don't put them on a time out. You put them on a time in, and you get down and you attune with them. You regulate with them emotionally, right? We're vibrational beings. We're energetic beings. And not 80% of communication is body language, right? It's reading the energy. I mean, it's harder in these Zoom worlds, but, as soon as we hopped on this call together, you're energetically reading my energy, right? And it's not about the words that I say. It's about, and this is why it's so difficult in this, because you miss so much from a communication perspective when we're not face to face with you, in person, right? The body language, essentially. And if you're shut down as a parent, or you're going through something, and again, what parent doesn't have days? I mean, God, right?
Oh,
we all do, right?
Yes.
We all do. However, your kids, they need, an escalated parent can't de-escalate a child. So that's what that attunement means.
Okay. And authenticity is basically being true to yourself and expressing yourself. Yeah. So what are some strategies? Because I know you cover a lot in your book of different ways that people can, I guess, look at mental health and also address their mental health outside of just the common, obviously, counseling and medication, which definitely have their place too. But you talk about some other stuff that look at things from a naturopathic perspective. So maybe you can get into some of those.
So the first thing is we want to understand that where there's 4 aspects to us, right? We're physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. And the Western system is focused mostly on that physical level, i.e., you've already mentioned it. Take a pharmaceutical for whatever, a pill for every ill. But what we want to figure out is before you take the pill, you want to work with a naturopathic doctor to help you investigate what is the root cause. And which macro system does it lie in on that physical level? Because it's not always neurotransmitter based. There's hormones too that you've mentioned, right? Hormones play a huge role. And then so do your organs of detoxification as well. So we want to assess which macro system or systems are we wanting to support in this individual. And I can tell you, for me, I would be depressed the entire month. Then I would start an antidepressant and I might be better for 2 weeks of the month. Well, that didn't tell me anything back then because I had no knowledge. But as you know, that's telling me, oh, something's off with your hormones, right? So some people have to work on all those macro systems. But the other thing is, when did it start? That's a key question. When did it start? And in some cases, as in mine, we might have to go all the way back to that in utero experience, because the mental, emotional wiring, and it's not just the maternal, it's the environment. There was a recent study out of Sweden that looked at premature births and whether the father was depressed. And that affected the birth.
Really?
Yes. And it was nothing to do with the mother. Mother happy, no problem. Because I really want to emphasize that, because moms we feel a lot of guilt, right? And the thing is, it's the whole environment. That, again, going back to what I just said a minute ago, we're energetic, vibrational beings. We're picking up on everything. So that sometimes you have to go back to in utero if it was stressful. And anybody who's considering to give a child up for adoption, I can guarantee you it's stressful, right? So, but also, when did it start? Did it start in high school? Well, what's happening then? Hormones, right? Did it start after you gave birth of your child? Oh, well, hormones. It drives me nuts that they prescribe antidepressants when it's at those times. I think it's not root cause medicine. So then we do want to understand that you can't make your neurotransmitters and your hormones if you don't have the right nutritional building blocks to do so. So you don't have a serotonin deficiency or a Prozac deficiency yeah, you might have a deficiency in serotonin, but you make serotonin. Serotonin is not made from an outside chemical called Prozac. It's made within your body from an essential amino acid called tryptophan. And the irony in my case, I was on and off these medications for 15 years. Nobody ever asked me what I was eating. I mentioned I had an eating disorder. When I analyzed my diet at nutrition school, naturopathic school in nutrition class, the only essential amino acid I was deficient in was tryptophan.
Yeah, makes sense.
Nobody asked me,
It's such a multidisciplinary approach. And I hear you on that frustration, because it frustrates me how a lot of women in their 40s would come to me and be like, how did I not know anything about my hormones until now? Like, why did I not know this when I was 15? They
don't teach it in school. And they don't talk about our profession in the school system. That's a whole other ball of wax that needs to change. That's a whole other ball of wax. But it is a multidisciplinary approach, because I think you're right. Like there's the physical, and physical includes more than just your brain and your body. It includes your hormones, and it includes, your exercise and your movement. And there's so much that has to do with physical. Right. And then there's hormones and all those things. And then there's nutrition, which nobody talks about. And even, it's funny because sometimes I have to answer those, these insurance questions, and they ask you like, are you a risky person? Do you jump off buildings? But they don't ask me, they ask me if I smoke or drink, but they don't ask me what I eat. And I'm like, don't you want to know? This is an important question. I even told the guy once, I'm like, this is some feedback. You guys need to ask this question. Totally. So yes, nutrition is really important. And I think this one particular, at least for me, I've noticed, nutrition is not one that people want to admit affect them emotionally. Like it, we don't want to admit, like, I don't want to admit that caffeine keeps me up at night, because sometimes I like to have my tea. I don't want to admit that sugar makes me grumpy, because I like to have cake on my birthday, right. And so, yes, I'm not expecting to be perfect or any of that stuff, but there is this link, and we have to really be aware that it exists. And then we have to allow ourselves to find other ways. And of course, a lot of it is emotional connection too, right? Like it feels soothing and, whatever. So I feel like nutrition is a whole other topic of conversation we could get into. Are there any other areas that you wanted to mention that people really need to focus on? Well, I just want to touch on, you mentioned exercise. I'll just mention this quote quickly, that the most overutilized prescription for depression and anxiety is pharmaceuticals, and the most underutilized is exercise.
Really?
Yeah. And there's been a lot of studies on this. And the thing that we really want to, and here's the thing though, this is again, coming back to what we started off talking, we mentioned at the beginning, is community and support. I can tell you, I had a depression. My last suicide attempt was 2009. And I had one of the, whenever you have these suicide attempts, it's not like when the attempt doesn't work that you're like, oh, yay, I'm all happy. Right? Like you're still depressed, and even more so than before you attempted suicide. But one of the things that was the only change I made was a friend asked me to play tennis. It was June. And we started playing tennis. That's the only thing I did differently. And by the end of that summer, I was no longer depressed. And look at what that got me. It got me outside, got me fresh air. It got me vitamin D from the sun. It got me community with my friend. It got me pounding the ball, hitting, because I was moving, I was eating. When I'm depressed, I don't eat. And if you don't eat, you can't make anything. You can't make neurotransmitters if you don't eat. You can't make hormones if you don't eat. So, I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think exercise needs motivation too. Like who wants to go out for a run? Unless you're a runner, right? Like at the beginning, when you're starting exercise, no one likes it. It's hard. It hurts your joints. It feels, oh, I just want to sit and watch TV. Like there isn't that motivation, but if you have someone else that's with you, it kind of brings you into, until you create a habit out of it, you need that pull and that support and that community and the encouragement, especially if you're feeling depressed or if you're feeling stressed or overwhelmed. Like there isn't really that, that push, that motivation.
You got to do something that you like. Mm-hmm. And I think, and I'll just share this as well. Listen, I get this. I've been depressed so many times. And anyway, there's been days when the only thing I've accomplished in a day is moving from my bed, getting dressed to the door. Sometimes that's taken me, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 hours to do that. And I go out and I come back and I can tell you this, I've never once felt worse right? But it was the getting going, right? It's always the getting going. And this is why I'm saying, this emphasis on if you can recruit a friend, because it's super helpful. Because when you're down and out, I get how hard it is to pull yourself up. It's really challenging, but you got to dig deep here. You've got to dig deep. If you're someone that's listening to this and struggling, you got to dig deep. And sometimes that's all I do in a day when I'm depressed. That's all I've been able to do. Anyway, so
even a small change for sure. Yeah. Thank you for sharing it and making it so valuable, because I think it is so valuable. We don't realize how valuable it is, even just to take a breath of fresh air, just to get outside. What else do you focus on?
Well, I was just going to say too, on that note, that Michael Pollan has said that, we've given up 2 hours a day for screen time, and given up 2 hours a day for screen time. And what have we given up? We've given up exercise and cooking, cooking in community, cooking, whether you want to cook with your husband or your children, right? We've become this fast food convenient nation, or society, I should say. So the foundation is definitely that nutrition, the sleep. I really focus on sleep as well, depending on the state that you're in. So if you're not getting enough sleep, then that's what we want to get. And if you don't have enough energy to get through your day and you're pounding the coffee, again, we got to look at, what's happening from the sleep perspective. If you're depressed and you're like me and you never get out of bed and you can sleep 26 hours a day when you're depressed, then we have to build in these structures and supports to get you out of bed, right? And the one thing for me, has been, it's been helpful being a mom, because there's structure built into a day. Yes, I would fake it. I would get out of bed, take my kid to school, go back to bed, and get out of bed when I had to pick him up. But at least I got up. So doing what you can to get yourself up if you're depressed and one that doesn't want to get out of bed, and see if you can stay up. And I'm okay if you just stay up sitting in a chair, looking at a cloud, watching it pass through that's fine. That's a great day. It's a great day. But then it's about looking at the stress and managing the stress. And that's where I look at your thoughts and your emotions and how you behave and react in the world. The ability to set boundaries, understanding your triggers, looking at the environment. As naturopathic doctors, we are, I think, one of the only professions that truly cares about the environment. 3 things about the environment I'll just touch on quickly. 1, the quality of the air, food, and water. So understand that, and this is really important, if you start an antidepressant and you're not getting better, because you should get better, if you don't, it tells me a couple of things. It tells me that it's the wrong macro system, and I should be looking at your hormones and your organs detoxification, or there's something from the environment blocking the receptors. So you might be making the neurotransmitter, but it can't get in the cell. And that's where this environmental piece comes into play. Second idea about the environment is genetics versus epigenetics. So genes load the gun, lifestyle pulls the trigger. With my diagnoses of bipolar disorder type 1, you don't get the message anywhere from anyone that you can heal from that. But I want to stand here as a beacon of hope, if you will, that actually, you know what, you can. It can be managed. Because I don't subscribe fully to the gene theory, because I couldn't look to the left or my right to verify the truth of the statement that the doctor always said to me when I asked, why is this happening? The answer I always got was, well, it's genetic. There's nothing you can do. And I felt like a victim. And I'm like, I'm not a victim. There is something I can do. And there's something you can do if you're listening as well. And then the third area under the environment is this idea of neuroplasticity, which basically means that this is not a fixed lump of cement between your 2 ears here, right? This is a lump of fat, and it has bendy qualities, plastic qualities. You can build a new neural pathway to think along the lines of your inner cheerleader versus the inner critic. And that's what I've been working on with myself for the last 30 years, is building this different pathway from I am not wanted to I am wanted. So you can do that. And then the last areas I work on, as if all that isn't enough, is compassion and love and spirituality, understanding and really encouraging and fostering this sense of this idea of listening to the inner wisdom, your intuition, that you are a soul in a beautiful suit of clothes right now, but this is a soul experience that you're having on this planet. Because I've had to reconcile why I'm still here. And so I won't go too far off the bandwagon or off a tangent there right now. I can come back and we can talk about that another time. But ultimately, just the last thing I'll say is, and for people listening, just answer this for yourself on a scale of 1 to 10. How much do you love yourself from a sense of, your self-esteem, self-worth? And, if you're not at an 8, 9, 10 out of 10, then you got some work to do and you got to figure out why.
Yeah. You skimmed over the last 4 or 5 areas, but I think they're so important. And I know they're much more than we can get into in depth here, but it's so refreshing to be able to talk to someone who actually sees the world. I mean, similar, maybe because we have similar training or, experience in life or what have you, but there's so much more out there that maybe we don't know about ourselves, or maybe we haven't found the resources yet, but there are things we can do, even if we've been told that there isn't. And so I feel like, thank you for saying that about bipolar, but I feel like that also applies to so many other things where we think that there is nothing to do, but there is so much. And also I think we don't realize the impact, at least not if you've had the training, if you haven't had the training about toxins and environment and all these things and how much they really impact every single chemical process in your body, and your whole body is full of chemical processes. And so it really impacts us in so many ways. And then of course the compassion and the love and the self-critic, like, the self cheerleader, which I loved that you said that. And that's part of the reason why I actually started doing this stuff with this community and leave. I loved my job, but it was a time for me where I really needed a different space. I needed something that was, supportive and reciprocal and growth oriented and, all of that. And I think there is something to be said about really asking for help and saying, like, I need help, or offering help to someone else, and really taking that time and saying, it's okay if I take that time to figure myself out. It's okay if I take the time to do what I need right now, because, we feel like we sometimes we can't, Mm-hmm. So I think all of those extra things that I'm sure you mentioned more detail in your book and when you work with your clients, but I feel like all of those things can be a whole 1-hour conversation in of themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Or more, right?
Or more. Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah. Is there anything that you wanted to share? I guess I'm aware of time. So is there anything you wanted to share to wrap up? And then I'll ask you where people can find you afterwards.
Yeah, well, just too that there are other modalities of medicine that are under-acknowledged and unappreciated, like homeopathy and traditional Chinese medicine and acupuncture. And these are more energetic forms of medicine, right? So we want to know these modalities are powerful and they work. And so if, just understand that healing is possible. And I'm not going to say that it's always easy, but it's possible. And you have to, it ultimately comes down to self-responsibility at the end of the day, and believing in your ability and believing in yourself, and understanding that there are people out there that can help you along this pathway. So that's important.
And not giving up, like finding what works for you, there's so many different strategies, and I've used many of them in my practice. Homeopathy for a while, acupuncture I did a lot of for many years. And it's interesting because I was trained in the science world. Like I was trained obviously as a naturopath too, but then I have this PhD and I was trained in that world. But then in practice, I just saw all the energetic medicine and how powerful it was. And so that's where I feel like we need to realize that there's so many different options, and we just have to find what combination of, different things works. And we don't have to do every single thing, but we have to find, what sort of combination works for us. And if we are able to find those resources and keep an open mind, I think it can be really helpful. Yeah. I really want to make sure that people know what your book is, because I think it'll be really helpful, and also where to find you. So thank you so much for all of the information that you shared. Where can people find out more about what you do?
Yeah, so just my website, which is Dr. Christina CH, and then Bjorndal, my last name, BJORNDAL, Orndal.com.
I'll link to it. I'll link to it too. I know my name is hard to remember too.
Exactly. It's hard to say, hard to spell. And then on Instagram, I'm on social media. So the typical usual suspects. And the book Beyond the Label. And there's also the Essential Diet, Eating for Mental Health, which is just more like a 2-week guide. If you're looking for a simple place to start from the nutritional side, those are both on chapters online.
Amazing. Thank you so much for joining me.
No, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode, please share it with someone who might need to listen. I'd also really love to hear from you, so please write a review on iTunes, or you can even send me a more personal note at hello@livingxo.com. Thank you for joining me. Until next time.